Hi there, I'm Amy from Cakes with Faces. Now, I've been travelling to Japan for 10 years and today I'm going to take you back to my first trip and talk you through what I did, all the hits, the misses, all the things I wish I'd known, so we can share some memories and there'll be some useful tips along the way. And if you're planning a trip, have a look at my Japlanning series, which is all about how to book everything and then how to get by when you're in Japan. They're all together in a playlist on my channel, and there's new Japan videos every Thursday if you want to subscribe. So my first trip to Japan was in April 2010. I stayed just in Tokyo and I went for 8 days, which isn't long at all. There's so much to do in Tokyo, you could easily stay for a bit longer than that and not get bored. I stayed in Shiodome, which is a sort of modern business district. It might seem like kind of a random place to stay, but back then I didn't really know all the different areas quite so well. And I wouldn't say it's the best place to stay, but it wasn't bad. I stayed at the Park Hotel. I picked that one because it's on top of an office block, so I knew we'd be guaranteed a really good view, and the view was amazing. You could see over Tokyo Bay and all the skyscrapers. It was really good. And our room was actually pretty big, which isn't typical of Tokyo at all. Most hotel rooms are tiny. We kind of lucked out with this hotel actually, and every time I've looked at it since, it's been way out of my price range, so I think it must have been on a special offer or something. I actually funded my trip by selling my childhood collection of My Little Ponies. My parents had kept them all in their loft. I had all the houses and about 300 ponies, so I sold them all online and used the money to fund my first trip to Japan. This was actually the year before I started Cakes with Faces, which is my business. It's just me. I design t-shirts like this one I'm wearing today, clothing, accessories, and I sell them online. It's cakeswithfaces.co.uk if you want to have a look. And because it was before I started Cakes with Faces, I had a lot more free time then. So I actually made this scrapbook with all my pictures, all the leaflets and tickets and everything, which is really nice to look through now. This was also before I'd ever made a video, so I've got some photos to show you. Some of them are pretty bad, and I've got a footage of some of the same places from when I've been back since. And there's videos about a lot of the places I'm going to mention on my channel if you want to know more about any of them. So I'd arrived in Japan for the first time ever and I needed to get some food. Now, you know how I always go on about how great Japanese food is and how you should try as much of it as you can. Well, the first thing I ever ate in Japan was Subway. Now, I think that's pretty bad, but at the time I was just so proud that I'd managed to acquire food. Before I went, I was actually pretty nervous because I didn't know how different everything was going to be, or if everything was going to be in Japanese, or if I'd even be able to understand anything. I taught myself a bit of Japanese, so I was just really proud that I'd managed to order this Subway. And actually, being so nervous about my first trip is part of the reason why I make my videos, to show you what it's like. And on the whole, it turned out to be nowhere near as difficult as I thought it was going to be. On my first day, I went to Odaiba, which is an area in Tokyo Bay. I don't know why I picked there, but it was quite close to where I was staying. And it's actually a really interesting area that's kind of different from the rest of Tokyo, and it's not always featured in guidebooks. I'd heard about a boat called the Himiko, which is designed by an anime artist, and it looks really cool. I'd actually seen it from my hotel room window and I wanted to take it over to Odaiba, but it turned out it wasn't running that day. So here's a tip for you. If there's something like that, something particular you want to do, just check the opening times or the running times because they might not be what you expect. So we took the regular boat over to Odaiba and lit round some shopping malls and Toyota Megaweb, and then we went to Miraikan, the science museum. I was actually really impressed with it. It's quite advanced and in-depth. They had loads of robots. There was a model that explains how the internet works, and we saw Asimo, Honda's robot. He can kick a ball and he can run as well, which is pretty impressive for robots. On the second day, I went to Akihabara, which is one of the places I was most excited about going. It's the centre for anime in Tokyo, with loads of shops with figures, merch, anime, manga, games, and electronics. You can easily spend a whole day there. In fact, lots of you guys in the comments have said you went there several times. I just couldn't believe how much there was and how cheap the figures were compared to in the UK. But actually, on my first trip, I missed out on quite a lot because I didn't realise how much was upstairs and below ground. Sometimes it looks like you're going up a fire escape or some creepy staircase that you shouldn't be going on, but that's normal. Just have a look and see what you find. After that, we went to take a look at the Imperial Palace, which is where the Emperor of Japan lives. You can't go in, but you can see it over a bridge and you can walk around the grounds. And then quite near that on my map, I spotted Godzilla statue. So of course we had to go and have a look. And it was so funny because it just turned out to be tiny. They've actually replaced this one now with a bigger one. And you can also see Godzilla in Kabukicho on top of the Hotel Gracery, which is a really good hotel. There's a room tour on my channel. And finally, I looked around Ginza, which has a lot of designer shops, which I wouldn't say is a must do unless you're into designer label shopping. Looking back now, I think this seems like quite a lot to pack into a day, and this isn't the ideal itinerary, it's just what I did, and it was quite a short trip. On the third day, I went to Shibuya to see the famous Scramble Crossing. I also looked around Shibuya 109, which is a shopping mall with lots of women's clothing stores. It turned out to be a bit more girly than my sort of taste, but if you're into kawaii fashion, you should definitely go there. There's not a whole lot of things to do in Shibuya apart from shopping. There's arcades, karaoke, lots of places to eat and bars. But if you're going to Tokyo, you probably want to see the Scramble Crossing, and it's right by the station. Oh, and now there's also Shibuya Scramble Square, which has a new observation deck on top of a skyscraper, and that looks really good. And of course, Shibuya is right next to Harajuku, which I was so excited about going to ever since I saw the fruits books with all the really colourful fashion. It's a centre for alternative fashion in Tokyo. I spent the whole time on the main street, Takeshita Street, and actually on my first trip I didn't even realise there was more than that. If you're into Japanese fashion or cute clothes, you can easily spend a whole day in Harajuku. Now obviously I found plenty to keep me occupied just on Takeshita Street, but if you cross over the road at the end, there's also all the back streets to look round, and there's also the area around Cat Street, and both of them are a bit more laid back, a bit more trendy with lots of boutiques and things. And as Takeshita Street's become a lot more touristy and crowded, you might find you prefer those areas. After that, we went to Nakano Broadway. Now, all this seems like a lot to do in a day, but I was on a fairly short trip. And when I've gone back, I've spent the whole afternoon just in Nakano Broadway. It's a shopping mall with lots of figures, collectibles, and just all sorts of merchandise. You really could find anything there. It's a little bit cheaper than Akihabara, and if you're into figure shopping, I'd always recommend you go to both of them if you have time. In the evening I went to Shinjuku, which I thought was a bit like London. It's really busy with lots of shops and restaurants, and we spent ages looking for this restaurant that does veggie burgers. At the time I didn't know as much about finding vegetarian options, and it was quite difficult at times, but I won't go into that now. On my first trip I didn't have a pocket Wi-Fi, so I didn't have the internet, and I'd always get one now. It makes it so much easier just to be able to look things up, check the maps. You can look up train times and opening times and things. On the next day we had a day out of the city and went on a coach trip to Mount Fuji, which was how I discovered I'm not a big fan of coach trips. If I went back now, I'd definitely go independently. There's lots of ticket packages for the train for tourists, and you can do what you want, take your time, and it's a lot cheaper. But at the time, I was kind of nervous about taking the train independently. I didn't know if everything was going to be in Japanese, and I didn't want to get stranded at Mount Fuji and not able to get back. So we went on a coach trip. It's actually not like that at all, and I would have been fine, but I didn't know that then. And we did get a pretty good view of Mount Fuji. Often you can't see it very well because it's hidden by clouds, so you're lucky if you get a good view. And we went up on the coach just above the snow line. It was really cold. As part of the tour, we took the Shinkansen, the bullet train, back, and I was so excited because I'd always wanted to go on the bullet train. Even though it was just a short trip, I couldn't believe how smooth and comfortable it was, and I took this really terrible video on my 1 megapixel camera. At the end of the trip, the tour guide was sort of hand-holding everyone and gave everyone really detailed instructions about how to get back to their hotels, but we sneaked off and went back to Akihabara. As I said, if you're into figures, you're going to want to go there more than once. In the evening, we went to an Alice in Wonderland theme restaurant. Now, I don't know how long it took us to find this place. We went around the block so many times looking for it, and in the end what we were looking for was this tiny sign on the wall in between two shops, and you had to go up a lift to get to it. Because what I didn't realise at the time was not everything's at street level. You have to go upstairs quite often to find things. So we took the lift up, and inside there were these huge storybook pages which we went through, and the theming was beautiful. All the waitresses were dressed like Alice's, and the food was really cute as well. Even the menu was adorable. It was in like a little box with a street lamp that actually lit up. I just loved the whole thing. Usually at theme restaurants, you can't expect the food to be the best, and they are quite pricey, but it is a fun experience. For the last 3 days, we went to stay at Tokyo Disneyland. Now, I'm not going to go on about it too much because I know not everyone's into Disney. We were quite lucky. It can get really crowded there and the queues can be quite long, but it wasn't too bad. One day it was pouring with rain, so it was pretty empty, but we still had a good time. We splashed out and stayed at the Hotel Miracosta, which is actually at the entrance to Disney Sea. And from our window, we could see into the park. We could see the Mediterranean harbour area and the volcano Mount Prometheus. It was so good. I was amazed at the theming of Disney Sea. It's so detailed and so beautiful. There's 2 parks at Tokyo Disney, Disneyland and Disney Sea. Disney Sea is only in Japan. It's completely different to all the other Disney parks around the world. And Disneyland is similar to the Magic Kingdom style parks. It's not identical, and it does have some rides that you can't find anywhere else. If you only have one day, I'd always recommend going to Disney Sea just because it's different. But if you're really into Disney, you'll probably want to go to both. So that's what we did each day. I wouldn't say it's the ideal itinerary, but it's what we did. And looking back now, I can see there are a few things missing. Firstly, Studio Ghibli, which seems kind of strange now. I don't know why I didn't go. If you like the films, and especially if you like the artwork, you'll really enjoy it. Book your tickets as early as you can before you go because they sell out every day. The next thing we didn't do is karaoke, which is so much fun. You're not on a stage in front of everyone. You get a private room for just your group, and it's just so much fun. I think it's an experience everyone should have. The next place we didn't go is Asakusa, which is an older, more traditional area with Sensoji, the oldest temple in Tokyo. Now, particularly at the time, I was a lot more into modern Japan than traditional temples and shrines, but usually if people go to one temple in Tokyo, it's going to be Sensoji. That does mean it's really crowded, so I think it's a good idea to pop into any smaller temples or shrines you come across as well. They can be a lot more atmospheric. And I also didn't go to Ikebukuro, which isn't a huge thing, but it's one of the other main areas. A lot of people go for the Pokemon Center. There's also an aquarium, a planetarium, a huge mall called Sunshine City, and Otome Road, which is like a mini version of Akihabara. The first time I went, I actually didn't like it at all because I didn't know where to go and I couldn't find the main areas. But if you follow signs to Sunshine City, that's where the good stuff is. So I guess that's the way it is. There were lots of things I didn't know about back then, and every time I go back to Japan, I learn about more new things and I enjoy it more as well. So I hope that helped, or you at least found it interesting. If you've been to Japan, let me know in the comments if that was anything like your experiences. And if you've got any questions, put them in the comments as well. And I'll be back next week. I'll see you on Thursday.